Ever notice how even with all the amazing medical technology we have these days, um, some things still feel kind of mysterious?
Yeah, totally.
Like take fever, for
Oh,
example.
for sure.
It's one of those things we've all been through, those chills, those aches, that feeling like you're practically melting into the couch, you know?
Totally. You just want to be like swallowed up by blankets and pillows.
Exactly. And it's like our bodies are working so hard to heal, so why on earth does it have to feel so awful? Like, shouldn't it feel good to be getting better?
Right. You think so?
So we decided to do a little digging into this whole fever thing.
Okay.
Just took a deep dive into this really interesting article in Popular Science.
Cool.
And you know what?
What?
It turns out that even scientists are still kind of scratching their heads about how fever really works.
Really? I thought they had that all figured out.
Nope, not quite. Apparently, it's way more complicated than we thought.
Ah, fascinating.
The article even quoted a top immunobiology expert, Dr. Jeff Rathmel, and he basically admitted that science doesn't really have a good answer yet. It's really not known. Isn't that wild?
That's kind of mind-blowing when you think about it. Like this thing we've all experienced and we don't even fully understand it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even the experts are still trying to crack the code.
Wow.
So if we don't even fully get how fever works, how do we even begin to study it, really?
Yeah, where do you even start?
Well, this particular study zeroed in on a really key player in our immune system, T cells.
Okay, T cells.
Now, these are a type of white blood cell that are absolutely crucial for our adaptive immunity.
Right, so that's the part of our immune system that's like, okay, I've seen this bad guy before, time to fight back.
Exactly. It's like the memory of our immune system, learning to target specific threats.
Makes sense.
And this is where the research gets really interesting.
Okay, I'm listening.
The scientists basically took different types of these T cells, put them in a lab setting, and then simulated different fever temperatures.
Oh, interesting. So they were like, let's see how these T cells react when things heat up.
Exactly. They wanted a front row seat to see how fever was impacting our immune defenses at the cellular level.
Clever. So what did they find out? Did the heat freak out the T cells?
Well, it's actually kind of surprising.
Really?
Some of those T cells, particularly the generalist ones, think of them like the new recruits of the immune system, they actually seem to thrive under the heat.
No way. Really? How so?
Well, they started multiplying faster, becoming more metabolically active. It's like the fever was giving them a boost of energy, helping them to do their jobs even better.
So it's like fever was putting those T cells through boot camp, getting them all pumped up and ready to fight.
Exactly. But it wasn't just about giving those generalist T cells a boost.
Ooh, what else was going on?
The study also found that fever could actually make a certain type of T cell called regulatory T cells less effective.
Hmm. Okay. Regulatory T cells, and those are, sorry, just got to refresh my memory here.
No worries. They basically act like the brakes on the immune system, you know?
Hmm.
They're there to prevent it from going into overdrive and causing too much inflammation.
Ah, right, right. So they keep things in check.
Exactly. But during a fever, it's like those brakes are loosened a little bit, allowing for a stronger, more targeted immune response.
Interesting. So it's like our bodies are saying, all right, immune system, time to unleash, no holding back.
Exactly. But here's where things get even more interesting and maybe a little bit complicated.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Lay it on me.
So they also looked at a specific type of helper T cell called the Th1 cell.
Th1 cells.
Yeah, these guys are super important for fighting off viruses.
Okay, gotta have those.
And they didn't exactly handle the heat quite as well as those generalist T cells.
Uh-oh, that doesn't sound good. What happened?
A lot of them actually ended up dying off under the higher temperatures.
Seriously. So some T cells love the heat, others not so much. That seems kind of counterintuitive, doesn't it?
It really does.
Yeah.
And it just goes to show how complex this whole immune response really is. But here's the catch. Those Th1 cells that did survive the heat, they actually emerged even stronger and more efficient at fighting off those viruses.
Whoa, so it's like what doesn't kill you makes you stronger, even at the cellular level.
Right. It's like a real-life survival of the fittest situation happening within our own bodies.
That's insane.
Yeah.
But I mean, there's got to be a downside to all this, right?
Well, yeah, I mean, we all know that feeling awful during a fever isn't just in our heads.
Right, exactly. There's got to be more to it.
And that's where one of the most surprising findings of this whole study comes in. It's all about those tiny powerhouses we have inside our cells, the mitochondria.
Oh, right, mitochondria. I remember learning about them in school, the powerhouses of the cell. They're like the tiny energy factories that keep everything running.
Exactly. And what the researchers discovered is that these mitochondrial powerhouses, well, they're actually pretty sensitive to changes in temperature.
Really? I had no idea. Sensitive in a good way or a bad way?
That's the thing. It turns out that fever temperatures can actually make them less efficient.
Oh, so fever kind of stresses out those little powerhouses. Could that be why we feel so crummy when we have a fever?
That's exactly what the research seems to suggest.
Hmm.
But it might be even more than just feeling lousy.
Oh,
This whole mitochondrial stress thing, especially if it sticks around for a while because of chronic inflammation, well, it could potentially even damage our DNA.
whoa, wait, seriously. So there's a possible link between fever, our mitochondria, and even cancer.
That's what this research seems to be pointing towards, yeah. And it really drives home the point that while fever can be a really valuable tool for our immune system, it's all about balance, just like most things in biology.
So a little fever now and then, probably not a big deal.
Right.
But long-term inflammation, that's when we need to be paying attention.
Yeah.
This is all so fascinating. I'm really curious, though. How do we even begin to study this complex process in like actual living beings? It's one thing to poke at cells in a petri dish, but real life is a whole other story.
Right.
It's way easier to just crank up the temperature in a lab setting. But trying to replicate that in an actual living organism, that's a whole different ballgame.
Yeah, I imagine there are a ton of ethical considerations too. You can't just like give someone a fever and see what happens.
Oh, for sure. Ethically, that's a minefield. But even just from a purely scientific standpoint, it gets super complicated.
How so?
Well, think about it. You're not just dealing with a few cells in a dish anymore. You've got different cell types, different organs, all these complex systems interacting with each other.
Right, the human body is not exactly known for its simplicity.
Definitely not. So trying to isolate the effects of a temperature change in that kind of environment, it's like trying to find a needle in a haystack.
Okay, that makes sense. So then how do researchers even move forward with this? I mean, they wouldn't just leave us hanging with this one piece of the puzzle, right?
No, they definitely don't want to leave us hanging. The scientists behind this study, they're already talking about the next steps.
And what are those?
Well, figuring out how to study these fever effects in living systems, that's the big one. They want to see how these lab findings actually translate into real-world scenarios.
Which makes sense because, I mean, fever is such a universal experience.
Right, we've all been there.
Yeah, it's like one of the most fundamental biological responses we have as humans.
And yet, for something so common, we're still just scratching the surface of understanding it.
It's true. And this new research, it's really changing the game, isn't it? It's not just about heat wiping out infections anymore.
Yeah, this study really highlights how much more is going on. It's about the way different cells react to that heat, the role of those mitochondria. It's all connected.
It really makes you rethink those moments when you're curled up in bed, shivering with a fever, thinking, oh, I know you're trying to help, body, but do you have to make me feel so awful?
It really does. And it kind of makes you wonder, what if we've been approaching fever all wrong? Like, what if instead of immediately reaching for the fever reducer, we should sometimes just let our bodies do their thing?
Interesting. You mean let the fever ride it out a little bit?
Well, within reason, of course.
Hmm.
But this research definitely raises the question, could there be, like a sweet spot, a temperature range where allowing a mild fever to run its course might actually help our bodies fight off infection more effectively?
So, like, instead of hitting the mute button on our body's alarm system, maybe we need to actually pay attention to what it's trying to tell us.
Exactly. It challenges this whole idea that we always need to outsmart our bodies, that any sign of discomfort needs to be immediately suppressed.
Right. Maybe sometimes the best approach is to actually listen to those signals, even if they're not always pleasant.
Exactly. And that's why research like this is so crucial. The more we understand about how these processes work, the better equipped we'll be to make informed decisions about our health.
Totally. Instead of just treating the symptoms, we can start to address the root cause and support our bodies in the process.
And that can make a world of difference in the long run.
Absolutely. It really makes you think twice about reaching for the medicine cabinet, huh?
It really does. Makes you appreciate the body's ability to just do its thing, even if it's not always comfortable.
Absolutely. And it just goes to show how much we still don't fully understand about something as common as a fever.
Right. Like we think we know it so well, but then research like this comes along and just blows the whole thing wide open.
Totally. It's such a universal experience, and yet it's full of these crazy complexities we're only just beginning to unravel.
And we've all been there, right? Sweating, shivering, wondering what's going on inside.
Exactly. But now we're getting a glimpse into those inner workings, like all the way down to those tiny mitochondria.
Which is amazing. I mean, who knew those little powerhouses were so important for this whole fever process?
Right. It all started with something as basic as a fever. And we've ended up exploring the very building blocks of our cells.
And it all circles back to that question we started with. Why does feeling better sometimes have to feel so bad?
Right. Let that come on, body. Can't you give us a break?
Yeah, but at the same time, it's kind of like our body is sending up a flare. Hey, something's happening here. Give me a sec to figure it out.
Right. Like a little warning signal.
And this research suggests that maybe, just maybe, instead of always trying to silence that signal right away, we should actually pay attention to it.
Interesting. So you're saying sometimes it might be better to just ride out that fever a bit?
Well, of course, always consult with a doctor. It's not one size fits all. But yeah, I think this research definitely challenges that urge to immediately suppress any sign of discomfort.
I see what you mean. So what does this all mean for our listeners today? Like, what's the takeaway here?
Well, I think it's a great reminder that even in this day and age, with all our technology and advancements, our bodies are still capable of surprising us.
Absolutely. We're always learning something new.
Exactly. And sometimes those surprises lead to incredible discoveries about our own biology, like in this case with fever, T cells, and mitochondria.
It's all about finding that balance, isn't it?
Totally. Like a little fever can actually be a good thing, but chronic inflammation, that's something we definitely want to avoid.
Exactly. It's all connected. And the more we understand about these connections, the better equipped we'll be to take care of ourselves.
Right. It's about listening to our bodies and making informed decisions about our health.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Well, on that note, I think we've covered some truly fascinating ground today. We've dug into the science of fever, unpacked groundbreaking research on T cells and those incredible mitochondria.
And most importantly, we've hopefully left our listeners with a newfound appreciation for the amazing complexity of their own bodies.
Absolutely. It's a vast and intricate world in there, and there's always more to discover. Speaking of which, if you'd like to dive even deeper into this fascinating topic, be sure to check out the full article in Popular Science.
It's definitely worth a read. And until next time, stay curious and never underestimate the incredible power of your own amazing body. See you next time.